So I was asked to talk about my journey through my Huddle world and where I started and where I've become. So one of the things about Huddles when I first started is I'd went through the training, but my Huddles weren't that good. They were actually pretty terrible from what I understand. But I'd went through the training. I used it more as an announcements. I put together lists of what I needed to talk about, what I thought the staff wanted to know about, and it was just reading off of a piece of paper. Coworkers weren't engaged. They didn't have a whole lot to say. It was a quick, 10, 15 minutes, and I just sat there and read off of a sheet for the coworkers, and nobody was really interested in that. So I had a couple people that observed the Huddle, and they said, "Hey, Don, why don't you come with us and let's show you around. Let's show some different styles of Huddles," which was their code for, yeah, you're not doing a great job and you kind of stink and you need to do a little better. But they did it in a very nice way, so I went with them, saw a couple of Huddles. We're super impressed with just the way it was different. Coworkers were raising hands, speaking, writing on the boards. They actually used their Huddle board or their Gemba board, which I had never used. It just kind of was a backdrop for what we had. So after I went through that, I realized, okay, I probably need to make some changes to it. Read through some of the training stuff that I'd had before, and then started changing the way I did it. It became less announcements, and it became more of what does the staff want to talk about. Once I got to the mentality that that meeting was about the staff and not about what I needed to say, it changed the whole way that we did the Huddles. All of a sudden I got full participation. If I had 13 coworkers working that day, I got 13 people there, and it was pretty regular. I didn't stand up there and just talk. It was someone would write a sticky note and say, "Hey, we really need to address this," and they would put the sticky note up on the board. They would address it, and then the next day we would have a Huddle, and then they would come back and we would say, okay, we'd move it through the board. It became an idea, and then it became implemented, and then it became something we did that month. And once the staff got to see the transition of all their ideas going through the board and that things were getting accomplished, it was a huge success, and people loved it, and they kept coming. So that was kind of the transition. That was the big turning point for me, was seeing other people and how they did their Huddles. A couple of the tips that helped me get to that point I started off with incentives. We would do sometimes some trivia, or we would ask about housekeepers on the floor. Hey, does anybody know who our housekeepers are? They're part of our team. Who can tell me their names? We have 3 housekeepers. Can anybody give me all 3 of their names? And the first person to say it got a meal ticket. And that was one of our ideas for the floor. And then the next day it was a couple of scratch-offs. And then, the Olympics coming around. When I was doing that, I said, I made it fun. So it was just a really quick, who's the partner of, the volleyball, the women's volleyball teams? Can somebody name that? And, oh yeah, we're watching the Olympics. But it was really quick. And that was the second tip I had, was to keep them short. The staff have a lot to do, and they want it to be meaningful, but at the same time, they don't want it to be long-winded. So 10 minutes, 15 minutes tops, depending on what they're talking about. We would go through that, and then they knew that it was something that they could come to, get the information, or have something that they wanted to address, and then they went back to their day. So that was a real big success. I also learned that each floor does it a little differently, and you have to figure out what works for you. For me, it was learning that I didn't have to do one every single day. We started doing it Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I got to hit most of my staff. But if I became repetitive, then I started to lose interest. So I always changed it up every day. And I learned that the staff would talk amongst themselves about it. If someone couldn't come to it, they would say, "Hey, what did I miss in the Huddle?" Which was really nice, because then that meant that they were more involved in it. And then they would pick it up, and I didn't have to repeat myself the following day. So it always got to be evolving. Another tip I had was I started it positive. If I got a patient recognition, that's what I started with. Hey, so-and-so got a tulip nomination or a daisy nomination, and then I read it from the patient, and everybody always liked to start off that way. And then I always asked at the end, who needs help? Who needs extra help on the floor? Are there any patient issues we need to know about? And someone would always speak up as far as, we have a patient who's confused, and everyone just needs to be really mindful that they're going to set off the bed alarm quickly, and we need to get in there fast. So it was nice. It helped with our fall risk. And then as far as anybody who needed extra help, it was always the person who didn't show up to the meeting. So everyone would go and hound that person and say, "Hey, are you doing okay? We didn't see you at the Huddle this morning." And that usually meant that they were having a harder day. So that was always really nice. It helped our teamwork, and it helped a lot of our quality measures too.